Afternoon, as chair, I'd like to welcome and call this workshop to order. The time is noon. I wish to welcome you to the superintendent's workshop being held at the Joe N. Idlet Junior Teacher Education Center. I ask that out of respect to everyone, please silence all electronic devices. Also, if you have any material you wish to share with any board member, please give that to our executive assistant, Mrs. Morey. And welcome to Mr. Barefoot on Teams, and also to our attorney today, Mr. Ansbacher. Welcome. He is sitting in for Ms. Shattuck. We'll take a break every 2 hours, or if needed before that, board members, please just let me know. And if you wish to speak during this workshop, please wait to be recognized by the chair. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn this over to the superintendent for the purpose of this workshop.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to begin by, as you just referenced, Sid Ansbacher, if you give us a brief overview of why he's here. He's going to be joining us this evening or for the rest of the day, serving as our attorney.
Good afternoon, Sid Ansbacher. I am attending in lieu of your normal attorney, who I understand is in Greece. I have been practicing since 1986. For about a quarter of a century off and on, I have been counsel, including general counsel, to the Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind, which is a state agency in St. Augustine, as well as counsel. Our firm is counsel to the St. Johns County School District. I also do substantial work for Flagler College and have done environmental work in the past for multiple other entities, including Seminole County Schools. It is my pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, Sid. We're happy to have you. Also want to acknowledge to the board item B today, which was an update for Project Adam. We're going to push that to our next workshop in 2 weeks. Ms. Burney is under the weather today, and she was going to make that presentation. It's not anything that you'll be approving, but we would like to have that full presentation provided by Ms. Burney when she's feeling 100%. The first item is a very quick update as it relates to the opening of schools. As you know, we've had, this is day 13 of school. We've had a very successful opening of schools. When you look at enrollment, we are just short 100 students in terms of the number that we must hit by October. So simple projections mean we'll probably exceed where we would want to be, which is a very, very, very positive. We went through an exercise last week in terms of looking at teacher allocations and student enrollment. And we're happy to report that we're not having to move any physical bodies or teachers this year, which is a testament to Mr. Fagan and his projections in terms of where students will be, when they're going to show up. We currently, for the last 3 weeks, have always been saying we have 13 openings. We now have 11. Always a different 11, well under the national average. We continue to make sure that we have staff in classrooms in order to provide quality instruction. We will not miss on a day of instruction. We push attendance each and every single day, and the same holds true for those who stand in front of our students as well as anyone who supports our classroom. Happy to report some of the new initiatives that this board approved, specifically Star Wars. Specifically cell phone. I have very intentionally put my place in our middle schools to observe that new policy. It has been absolutely outstanding to see the change of class at Oslo Middle School, where students are hurrying to class, but talking and communicating with one another. I've been able to observe lunch at Storm Grove Middle School, where students don't have their heads down, dug in their phones, but ultimately communicating and just having an absolute wonderful time at lunch, eating a very nutritious lunch. So that is going extremely effective. Just an absolutely outstanding opening of schools. Our on-time arrivals and dismissals in terms of our buses is running extremely smooth. We're continuing to look at Treasure Coast Elementary School. As we're pending construction on 512, we want to look and see if there's a way that we can make sure we get all of those cars off the road on 512 prior to the opening of that construction, because that's just going to make it worse. So we're on top of that. Just proud of the team. The level of instruction that I've been able to observe so early in the school year has been outstanding. We've already finished our first progress monitoring assessment, and I'm happy to report in each of the different levels, we're starting about 1% or 2% percentage points higher than where we started last year, which is a great sign in terms of what we were able to experience last year in terms of academic gains. we always are concerned about that summer slide and the regression of student outcomes as they go through the summer. What we're seeing this year is our students are coming in at a better place than they started last year, which kind of allows us to come to the understanding, well, we're going to have a better outcome as well because we're starting in a better place. So that is a brief opening of schools update. Just very, very excited about where we're at and the momentum that we continue to build through our school system. And
Go ahead, Ms. Rosario.
Dr. Moore, I have a question about something that you just mentioned with the different 11 vacancies. You said every time it's a different 11. Did you mean that the 11 vacancies keep changing?
yes, so
Why is that? Is that turnover, or are people
It would be-
quitting?
it
Are
would
they
be-
saying this isn't for me?
it would be a combination of all of the above. It would be turnover. It would be positions that are being generated or allocated to schools because they have increased enrollment. There's a number of different realities in terms of why a position opens. So all of the above.
And that's spread out throughout?
Yeah.
Do we have any particular school that has more than 4 or 5 vacancies?
No, not
At a
this time.
time? It's just spread out?
I think we have 2 instructional opens at Sebastian River High School. Outside of that, it would be 1, and that's our second largest school. So having 2 instructional openings is we always want to have 0, but having 2 at a school that size is something we can manage.
So I'm asking this because I spoke with a friend of mine who is an assistant principal in St. Lucie County. She has 2 positions that have been open in core areas, and it is so incredibly difficult. She says there is literally, like, her hands are tied at this point, and she's really worried that she's not going to fill those 2, and this is elementary school. She just needs to fill those 2 positions. So, of course, we brainstormed, some different things, and I'm not quite sure how St. Lucie does it. I know that they have their, like, Human Resources has their, I guess, pick of where to post the vacancies. LinkedIn is certainly one of those sites, and, we talked about some of the other sites where you can post some availabilities, but what's our game plan moving forward to get these 11 positions filled? So I'm going to say so late in the year because the year already began, but what's the game plan to kind of get these positions filled? And if we don't, what's plan B?
So Plan B, let's start with Plan B because the reality is students are in those classrooms today. So whether it's instructional coaches or district staff, we make sure, or a long-term sub, who we provide the support and lesson planning support to make sure quality instruction is taking place. That is the process that we're in right now. And we have been very intentional about recruiting and looking for teachers and being very innovative and going out and identifying positions. So having 11 positions when you have around 1,150 teachers is a very, very regular number. We will never be at 100% just based on our size, but it's always being able to look at and say, how are we going to fill those positions? So the team, whether it's Dr. Soot, Ms. Christofoli, very aggressive in looking at opening positions. One of the ways we could have filled those if we didn't have enough students in our system, we could have moved closed positions in one school and then moved those teachers into those open positions. But, good news, we are still attracting students in our school system, which is really, really solid, and happy to report that. So we're not able to move those teachers around. So we continue to recruit, we continue to get the word out there, and then we continue to make sure when we have our teachers, which is our #1 strategy, is to invest in them, provide them as much support as possible. We do not just say, here are the keys and we'll see you in 180 days. It is ongoing support, build that capacity. We know, and we have to hire less teachers each and every single year because of the investment that we make in new teachers to make them, A, feel part of our family, B, feel part of a culture. This is hard, complex work, but with the highest levels of support and connecting to other teachers who do this work, it's great, powerful work. And that has been the #1 reason we have to hire a lower percent in comparison to like districts.
Do we allow schools the opportunity to do the recruiting on their own, or do we do it through the district?
So as a big blanket, we do some of that recruiting, but then we funnel them right into the schools. And some of the cultures in our schools, that they can sell it better than we ever could in terms of when you go there to interview, how you feel when you're welcomed. That's what keeps people in our schools and wants people to come to our district.
I think what I meant is, are we allowing our principals and APs to actually create the postings on these different sites? That's what I think I meant to ask.
So all of the county postings and all of the state postings, we do that. We want our principals and administrators focused in on one thing, teaching and learning. And if I'm going to have district support who's not at a school, they're going to take the burden off of principals and administrators. So a lot of that work that we do for principals, and we push them to schools ultimately for principals to be the closers and close the deal with those teachers.
So last year, there was I'm going to say it was last year, a bill that was signed to allow schools to recruit veterans. It was something that I've been talking about for quite a while, that we should put it out there, right? If you're a veteran and you're interested, come to the school district or however way you want to create that. But I haven't seen that anywhere. I haven't seen the recruitment of veterans. And I know that we have plenty in our community, but that's another avenue that I'd like us to kind of venture into, because you never know who might be highly qualified, who's sitting home saying, what can I do? I'd love to be able to get into the schools. And if they don't know about it, how are we going to recruit them?
Absolutely, and we continue to push. Actually, Martin County has hired one on the Treasure Coast, and I'm meeting with him tomorrow, so I'll be sure to inquire as to how he's able to get that one.
So can we get a letter out or a flyer or something to the local veterans administration, local veterans council, local veterans groups, so that they can get to their members this information?
We're going to exhaust all avenues continuously.
Okay.
Any other board members, comments? Dr. Moore, I made it to every school, but it took me 4 days. I think it just took you 2.
2.
And every school I went to, you felt like you were in about the 4th or 5th week of school, going into classrooms, talking to principals, being out there during cafeteria duties, so job well done. I think we'll continue to have issues with teachers. I think I saw a week or so ago how many, 6,000 in Florida, and that counts permanent subs, that aren't fully certified. So, and with people not going into education, it's going to get harder and harder. But just kudos to personnel, Mr. Bass, everybody recruiting, because just having 11 and then making sure we have someone in there as either a permanent sub or some of our district staff going out, I appreciate very much. But it was a smooth opening, I thank you. Yes, Ms. Barrymore.
I too visited almost all the schools. I haven't gotten to a couple of them because I got there when they were doing something that I couldn't see, like testing. So I won't walk in a classroom when they're testing. They were, like you said, very, very engaged, very already on task first day, which is great, teaching and learning. But of course, when I go walk the campus, I look at safety issues and I contact you right away when there's something that I'm concerned about or, see. And I appreciate that you are very attentive to that and taking care of things that need to be taken care of. And, teachers I found were very eager to share information, positive, negative, and hopefully with some positive suggestions, and they were, which was great. The one thing they did comment over and over again was how nice it was to see board members and the schools. And so I encourage all the board members to get in the schools and see what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Next.
All right, so our next several items will be presented by Mr. Bass.
Good afternoon. First item I've got is the IRCA contract, which we closed on, and IRCA members have ratified it. Just want to say again that this was a different process that we used this year. It's interest-based bargaining, which is very different from the typical across the table, kind of almost a contentious type of setting. We came together, the district staff, IRCA's board, and we worked through 10 different issues on the contract, and it was things that we both wanted. Collectively, we did what I feel is one of the best jobs I've seen in a contract that benefited students. It was some really good things done there. I'm just going to go through and highlight those. I know everyone has received those earlier on in your packets, but staff discipline, we outlined the procedures and processes that we go through in that. That was kind of left very vague in the previous language, but now it is spelled out, so it is, there's no ambiguity there. Flex time, when staff works beyond the regular contracted hours, how we are going to handle that in a uniform fashion. Administrative meetings, swapping 45 minutes at the end of a day. I believe we picked out Wednesdays, and then they can recapture that time, either going home early on Friday or some other time, but it allows principals and to come in and have those extra meetings weekly, and gives them, great time for short professional development, things like that, because before you were always so compressed for time to meet the confines of the contract. Parent-teacher conferences, we made that uniform across the district and spelled that out. Assignments and reassignments, we put provisions there that would be very beneficial for both the principal and teachers if they were having to be moved. The parent-teacher conferences, again, we made that uniform throughout the district. Lesson plans, contingency plans, seating charts, we are now keeping all of that in a central location in Canvas, so that is there for record keeping, and also they're available for administrators to be able to go and find, because before you would have like 3 or 4 different areas where teachers may be having lesson plans, and now we've got it in one unit they can go look at. We also outlined the president's leave time again, the same as last year. Health insurance was also within the contract, and the health insurance will be the same for CWA and all staff members. So you had a increase for our premiums this year, and of that increase amount, the district is going to pay 9.2% of that increase, and the staff will pay 5% of the increase. Just to give an example, if we're talking about the employee only, monthly, the increase on the high plan was $5.85, $3.20 for the middle plan, and 75 cents for the low plan. So it was a small amount, but yet we felt like we needed to do something because every dollar counts in everybody's pocket. Then salary increase was the last thing. We did some good stuff with salary. Staff members, instructional staff members could get up to a 4.2% raise. We put that in buckets because we had such compression previously with getting everybody up to 47.5 a couple of years ago. We balanced that out. Then here are the 2 things I'm really excited about. The performance pay, we knocked the performance pay down in amount, so that now a highly effective teacher who's on annual will get $125, whereas before it was $1,000, I believe. And then it was $1,300 if you were grandfathered in, or PSC. No, I'm sorry, flip-flop that. But it's $125 and $62.50 for effective, $150 for the PSC. What we did with the additional money that we had budgeted for performance pay was we put that into a retention pay. So if you've been in the district for 1 to 2 years, you're going to get an additional $500 annually. 3 to 8 years goes to $900. 9 to 15, it goes to 1,000. 16 plus is 1,200, which kind of goes to one of the things that you bring up our openings. This would be something that would be incentive to keep staff members here. So really excited about what we did with the teacher's contract. And again, one of the best experiences I have had in negotiating contracts in over 21 years. I mean, it was really smooth and really flawless. And, I can't say enough about IRCEA and their staff that was there, because they were very open to the things that the district wanted to do. It was just a great experience. So
Thank you.
I look forward to the next time we have to do it. And this is a 1-year contract. So that is my first item.
Okay, just a minute. Any comments, board members, on that one? Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, how come we're doing just a 1 year and not a multi-year? We did a multi-year during the last contract, and it worked out great. And so now we're going to see ourselves right back in the same situation in just a few more months.
That was a decision that we kind of pushed for the 1 year just because of the stability of the budget, and knowing how we would go forward. We didn't want to overcommit for 3 years, not knowing of our student numbers.
Yeah.
You know, because you're seeing a lot of school districts in the state that are losing students, and we didn't want to have to go through and have a reduction in force down the road. So the 1 year we felt was what we wanted to do. And again, going back to the process, I feel like if we have to do this every year, if we go through this process, it will be something that will be beneficial. Honestly, I
It's
do.
interesting because last year you were all on board with multi-year contracts, and now it sounds like you're not. Multi-year contracts just allows, for me, I see the stability in the multi-year contract. 3 years, it is what it is for 3 years, and then we'll see you again in 3 years.
I think it goes with the atmosphere in the state of budget, and how everything's going. I mean, 3 years ago, we felt like, yeah, we felt pretty good at where we are with budget and the atmosphere, but now it's just like, you don't know.
So, a couple of things, I mean, I wasn't, obviously, I didn't sit at the table, but I still have a concern, and clearly there's nothing that can be done in this conversation, but I'm going to voice my opinion in the difference between the first-year teacher and the teacher of 29 years plus. First-year teacher starts at 48.5, and the 29 plus is at 56. That's less than $10,000 difference, just in the base salary alone. That kills me. That kills me. That you are here 29 years plus, and you're less than. And I know you're going to say, but there's this, and but we get to add on. Just looking at this chart alone as a new teacher coming in, I would say, oh wow, that sounds great. But as a teacher with experience from another place, this might not look like, just looking at the base, just looking at that chart, might not be as impressive to kind of say, this is where I want to be.
So just to clarify, that chart is only applied for when teachers come into the district. So if you have a teacher that's been here for 26 plus years, they're going to be making well above 56,000. Because over time they've gotten salary increases, and then you tack on the performance pay. They're going to be well above 56. Now, but going back to what you just said, and that is
That's what I'm
something that we've got to work on, is where we bring those people in. We've got to do some work on that, and that will be coming up next year.
Well, that's exactly what that's what I'm referring to. So I almost see that this gap is not getting, it seems like it's getting closer as opposed to getting further apart. So I'm throwing that out there because obviously IRCEA agreed, the membership agreed, I suppose, to this, but it's not something that I would have preferred. I would have preferred to see more for the more senior teachers with more senior experience, just so that we can see that higher gap, right? The other question is, you mentioned something about school districts are losing students. Where are they losing students? To what? To the family empowerment scholarships?
Yes, ma'am.
How many have we lost so far? Do we know?
Through the chair, Mr. Fagan can probably expand, but we no longer have the ability to determine the number of students that we've actually lost to the Opportunity Scholarship that we did last year. What we do is make a projection based on FTE, and as long as we hit that specific number, we're able to allocate ourselves. Now, we have a very low projection to make sure, ideally, we would love to be having a lot more students to add. But at the end of the day, the number that we established for ourselves to fund ourselves for this year, we were able to hit that particular number. So I think what you're going to see going into next year and future years, as private schools open up, the availability of seats will continue to expand to offer vouchers. Enrollment will decline. So as our county is growing, we are a growing county, very few people who move into our county actually have school-age children, so that offsets one thing. And then ultimately, as additional private schools come on who offer the Opportunity Scholarship, we will then have to determine what is the impact, if there is any impact. Mr. Fagan?
Through the chair, to put some numbers to the excellent narrative that Dr. Moore gave, is last year you had 564 family empowerment students. Next year, the projection is 1,100. Last year's cost was $4.5 million. This year's cost goes to $10 million. And what Dr. Moore was referring to, we don't have the ability to track, is now they have removed the districts within that process of which they have to be enrolled here and then reported to DOE, and they kind of do a little reconciliation to match up what the two organizations, when they apply to them, they send them a file to say, I've got 10 kids in Indian River who've applied for scholarships, and we show 10 kids on the enrollment that are not in our schools. They go, okay, we can go ahead and pay. That's going away, so we won't have the ability to reconcile that number. We would just be told it's 1,100 kids, and they'll just deduct that revenue.
So there has to be a way. I mean, if we had 500 fifth graders last year, and now we have 450, I mean, do we not know where those 50, do we not investigate? Do we not reach out?
To the
Do we
chair,
not say,
if-
where are you? How come you're not re-enrolled? Do we not attempt to find out where these kids are?
Through the chair, yes, within focus, when a child exits the system, we do ask questions, where are you going? But answering specifically about family empowerment, we don't have the ability to reconcile that.
Do the parents have maybe I don't understand how they do it, but is there like a form that they say, why are you disenrolling, if that's a word, why are you, taking your child out of our school system? Is it because you're homeschooling, or you're doing a family empowerment, or you're moving out of state? Do they have that ability?
To the chair, yes, ma'am. They will do that within our system. They will tell us, I'm going out. But what I'm talking about is when DOE actually takes the $10 million, I can't tell you what 1,000 kids that is, because they have taken that away
Gotcha.
from us. They tell
But
us.
we still know, we can still
Yes.
track. So do we know now how many students have indicated that they are going to the family empowerment through just their, exit interview?
To the
or
chair,
whatever
I'm
it is?
assuming that's somewhere within focus, and we yes, we
We
can
just
pull
have to
that.
access
Yes.
that. Do we suppose now that 1,100 student, because I remember you predicted these numbers last year,
To the chair, yes, ma'am.
the 1,100 would be for this school year 23-24, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, any other board member questions or statements? Just a couple things, if you don't mind. I'll start out with, we'll never pay teachers enough. That's number one. Number two, when we were required to do the beginning teacher salary, that did not add everything so that with our compression scale, that everybody would be getting that increase. It was just expected of the districts to start that off. Mr. Bass, Dr. Moore, Mr. Fagan, one-year negotiations are very smart. We have no idea how this voucher system will affect us. And going in there 1 year instead of saying, oh, we have to lose teachers, that's something we don't want. So that's very smart. I have heard good things about it. I think the flexibility is key. I think it's key for what we do for our children, and our principals saying, okay, say extra here, then you could go there. I mean, that's what you do with your teams. I have talked to Ms. Christofoli about the staff discipline. That's much more clear, and I love it. I've heard the teachers say they like that the lesson plans are in, the principals say lesson plans are in one spot. I like that. But I was going to say one other thing, a professional service contract. I do like, again, wish it could be more money, but I do like at the end, adding money to those who stay with us, I just like the positive movement on that because, we want to make sure our teachers feel that they are valued because they have a very, very challenging meeting. So good job on especially that one-year contract. Anything else, board members? All right, Dr. Moore?
Oh, I've got a couple more items.
I'm
All right,
sorry,
so next
Mr.
time, through the
Bass.
chair, is the health insurance for CWA, which they did vote and ratify that. And again, it was the 9.2% covered by the district and 5% covered by the employee. And then the next item I've got is the agreement with CWA on the salary increase. They had a caveat in their 3-year contract. The third year, if the consumer price index was above 5%, in Tampa area, that was the area that was identified because I don't believe there was a exact identification for the Vero Beach area. That was the closest one that resembled that. However, a couple of years ago when they put that in, we went back and negotiated salary there for a salary increase, and we agreed to a 3.25% increase for non-instructional union, CWA. Keep in mind, they were already getting a 1.25 increase already in year 3, so their increase for this year is 4.5%.
I have a question.
Ms. Berenborg, thank you.
Yeah, I know that you're talking about the union employees on both of those. How about people that aren't represented by union?
So we are taking this to you today, and we are going to be coming back next meeting or the following meeting with something for non-bargaining units.
Okay.
Anyone else? Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, I think that, I'm not sure what Mrs. Berenborg was referring to, but did you answer with regard to the teachers who were non-union members?
No, ma'am. If approved today by the RCEA contract, that will take care of all the instructional MBUs. Also, the CWA, that will take care of everybody there that's with CWA. Then the people who are not in a bargaining unit. So it would be,
Separate from
yes,
the
ma'am, it would be executive assistants, pro-tech, administrators.
Can you also talk to the question that I had earlier? Can you explain the role of the union president moving forward, the 50-50, her job responsibilities?
Okay, so
Please.
going back to IRCEA?
Yes, I'm
Okay, so
sorry.
we're off of CWA. going
Yes,
back
I
to
know, I'm
IRCEA.
sorry. Or you can come back to it after. You don't have to insert that in here if you want to come back to it after.
Well, I can do it right now. So
Okay.
we had, in our language, one of the things was the union president and their assignment. And for years in the past, they were 50% in the classroom, 50% doing union work. Last year, we went to a full-time release in which they would do 50% work for the district and 50% union work. So that is the same as last year. This year, the union president will be working actually with curriculum and instruction in their PD points department, and then also in anything else that Dr. Moore assigns them, because that falls under him with the union president, and then 50% for the union business daily.
Okay.
So is she,
Go ahead, Ms. Berenborg.
so is she evaluated by you or you? Okay.
All right, any other questions on that area? Okay. Mr. Bass.
And then the last thing is legislative priorities. And what we did was, and I know we've got a policy or a act item coming up for policy, but we wanted to go ahead and put that out to you guys today. Not sure if we want to discuss it much today, but we gave you what was there last year so that we could, either leave stuff on, take stuff off, give us a month of time to get together, reorganize it, and bring it back to you in the September meeting, because our legislative delegation meeting is October the 2nd this year.
Board members, any questions on that? Reviewing it, Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, because we have not had I guess maybe this would be the discussion to have that in terms of what our priorities are. But I looked at my priorities from just a few months ago, and my priorities would still be the same. So if you want to keep mine on, I'm totally okay with that. The one thing, though, that I would like us to discuss with the first check mark, and again, I'm just throwing this out there in kind of like a brainstorming way. If there is a way to ask for funding for schools to have full metal detectors, not wand detectors, but full metal detectors, maybe there could be funding that could provide that. I'm not sure where we would stand with that, but there are several schools down south that are actually implementing full metal detectors in their schools. And I'm wondering if there could be a way that we can ask for the money for that. I mean, it doesn't hurt us to include it in there. Maybe as part of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas something. I don't know how you want to think about it, but if you want to just think about it, I'm okay with that, but all of my other priorities are good to remain, if that's all right,
Okay, all right.
with you and with the board members.
Ms. Barrenborg?
Yes, thank you. Two things. One, of course, is the TAN discussion we have every year at this time. That's something that we'd like to discuss. But the other one, as far as metal detectors, that's something I think we need to talk about in the shade in our safety meetings, and the board needs to come to some sort of consensus to move forward on that in a shade meeting. That is a safety issue, and I think we've discussed in the past the positives and negatives to putting those in place, because it sounds like a great idea, but then when you hear from the experts, you kind of go, So I think that that's a shade meeting discussion.
Oh, just a minute. Mr. Barefoot, I just want to make sure if you need to say something. I'm sorry. Are you good, Mr. Barefoot?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, sorry, but I want to make sure. Looking at the legislative priorities from last year, I'm probably okay with most of them, but it gives us a month to look at these to see if we want to bring anything else in our September meeting, so Dr. Moore can talk about it at the October 2nd meeting. And the safety meeting is obviously something where we talk about, every avenue that we can use to protect our students, and that, of course, is not in the sunshine. So, but the priorities in general, and we'll be talking about this later with FSBA for a board member to be nominated to serve on the advocacy committee, which is also, then you can also volunteer to be on the state and federal platform, which I did last year, and they're very good. Quite a few meetings, but they're very good. And then you can kind of see where the state is going. But Mr. Bass, you probably remember that you get some very similar things almost every year from, the base student allocation, transportation, IEPs, and and the one last year with both state and federal was mental health, which was huge. So I like the fact that we can look at it for a month and obviously give our input to Dr. Moore during our meetings too before we decide. Ms. Barrymore?
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to kind of highlight and really emphasize is the vaping issue. Vaping's gotten so out of control. If you look at the numbers and what's going on, it's really kind of sad. Since the legislation changed 2 years ago about local rule, and I think that I know that we have someone working on that, and I think that we need to get behind it and discuss it as a board to see what we want to present or put forward as far as a priority and how much we want to put an effort towards making that a vocalized priority, because it's out of control.
Okay.
All right, any other comments, board members? Okay.
I think I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Dr. Moore, I think we're going to Mr. Seymour next, right?
As the next item.
Thank you. Through the chair, this is just a continuation of the agreements that have come to us from our local law enforcement agencies, and one department needed a board meeting to have theirs approved, and that would be the Vero Beach Police Department. That was agreed upon in August 8th. And the only difference now is that we're looking, instead of a one-year agreement, we have a 3-year term. That's all that I have.
Any questions on that contract for Mr. Seymour? All righty. Mr. Fagan, I believe.
It's H through L.
Good afternoon. Through the chair to the board, 5 quick items. One item is the rebidding of the health clinic. We're in the middle of that process. The RFP has been issued. Responses are not due until later in September, so currently not too much to update on that other than the fact that we are in the process. Next item, as Mr. Bass already went over, we have before tonight the board approval of the health care increases for the district's contribution, which is 9.2%.
Any questions, board members, on the health care?
Yes.
Ms. Rosario?
Back to the rebid. I think you kind of skipped over that a little bit. So I read through this, and is there anything that you can just share with us that would be some major changes, or it's just a renewing of the contract?
Through the chair, right now, we're in a cone of silence because the RFP is out on the street, so we limit any and all correspondence to any kind of conversation at this point in time.
So what is on the, so then what is this here that we're looking at?
You ultimately are looking at a complete rebid to whoever that provider is
Gotcha.
at care. So
I got it now.
instead of it being Premise, it would be either Premise or another company.
Okay. I
Premise is
understand.
more than welcome to rebid, but other than that.
I understand.
All right, anybody else? Okay, Mr. Fagan.
Health insurance. Final item, one item tonight is for the TAN, approximately $12 million. We're going to be approving that tonight. Settlement will be on August 31st. Cost is about $194,000, a little bit more from the prior year, as expected because the interest rate went from 2.5 to 4.5. Disposal of surplus property, standard item, except there are IT carts. These carts are not being disposed of. They're just being taken off the surplus list. They're going to be left at the schools for the schools to use for various purposes, STEM, art, anything else that they want to have a secured mobile device that they can move all the carts around. Next item is the purchase of a new truck for warehouse and district operations. The other one, the old one, is about 2019, run into mechanical problems, and also the ability to surplus that vehicle should we get a good deal where we could trade it in and get a new one,
How much was that new one again?
somewhere between 60 and 90.
Okay.
Used one 60, new one 90, sorry.
Yes, okay.
And that's it. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Fagan on his wonderful presentations? All righty. District Strategic Plan and Superintendent Performance Assessment System.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and as you know, this is an update on our district strategic plan. One of the innovative things that this board approved prior to my arrival is a 100% alignment between my evaluation as well as the district strategic plan. Why did we do that? Why did we do that? Simply because we want to ensure we keep the main thing the main thing. And if we're going to go out there and evaluate individuals, we need to make sure the work is aligned and that we are ultimately moving our system and our district forward. So as you know, we designed this strategic plan forward thinking. So we knew when we created this, the pandemic started, and a lot of districts just took their foot off the gas and say, here comes the pandemic, there's going to be learning loss. That is not what this school system did. We approved this strategic plan in the midst of the pandemic, and there were some things that we did knowing, A, we are in the midst of the pandemic, and there was going to be impact as a result of the break and disruption within instruction. And we were shifting standards to old standards to new standards. And when they do that, they take away learning gains for a year. And it becomes very, very hard, if not impossible, to evaluate a year's worth of growth from the previous year to the current year because it ultimately is a new assessment with more rigorous standards. So we looked at some different areas that we're going to talk about a little bit later on how we assess the plan. That was looking at state rankings. All 67 districts were faced with the pandemic. All 67 districts were charged with shifting standards. My intention in putting this system forward was to do one thing and one thing only: continue to push around the quality of instruction in order to ensure we do become the literacy capital of America, and that when you look at the school district of Indian River County and you consider moving into this community, the school system is a value add and a great reason to move to our community. So the first slide that I have here speaks through the data that was provided by the Florida Department of Education. It looks at each of the criteria, the academic areas, and what you look here is all 67 districts across the state of Florida. And when you look at this, there are only 4 school systems in the state of Florida that are in a better place today based on academic outcomes than they were before the pandemic. One of those is the school district of Indian River County. The other 3 counties are, if you added them all together, they're still 5,000 students short of where we sit. So they, obviously the smaller the cohort, the more movement you're going to have in percent. So I show this because we do have a strategic plan that goes over 5 years. So if you were to evaluate how did the district do in its strategic plan, better than most, significantly better than most. And we continue to get accolades and acknowledgments for this success. But ultimately, when you look, how did we do last year in comparison to this year? even though there are new standards. When you put all of those academic areas together and you look at where all of the districts were, you see some districts, are getting some gains. But School District of Indian River County in each of those, all of those criterias is still fourth in terms of movement from last year to this year. So whether you're looking at over the course of time, is this school district moving? The answer is a not negotiable 100% yes. If you're looking at how has the system moved from last year to this year, significantly. Top 4 in the state of Florida. When you look at our surrounding counties, where the criteria is mostly the same, the environments are mostly the same, you'll see that the state's a little bit of growth. Congratulations. Brevard slightly down. Martin slightly up in terms of last year. St. Lucie slightly down. But significant growth, once again, by the School District of Indian River County. So we're very, very proud of what we've been able to accomplish, but let me say clearly, the work is not done. We will celebrate these outcomes while at the same time allowing that success to fuel us forward, to push us forward, because although we've seen significant improvement, we're not satisfied with where we are and we want to continue to grow. So when you look at the first area of my evaluation as well as our district strategic plan, you'll see that our target in student scoring at level 3, our target was to move to 21. We actually hit 19. So we're proud we hit the target or exceeded the target. Math achievement is combined. We wanted to hit a target of 33. The criteria released by the state was math 3 through 8, algebra, and geometry. So when you look at each of those criteria, once again, superseding the target. Science achievement, the target for this year was 52. We actually hit 57. In middle school acceleration, the target was to be moved to 17. We think we're going to be 1 or 2 at the end of the day, because we're at 91% of our students in 8th grade or 7th grade who took algebra or geometry, passing that assessment. The simple reality is, the state's going to go back and they're going to norm reference these standards, and there's going to be a slight improvement or a slight decrease. But that is going to be exactly the same for all 67 districts. Our rate of improvement ultimately is something that we should be proud of when you look across each of the specific content areas. So very, very proud of what we've been able to accomplish in focus area 1. We were able to hit actually 3 of the 5 standards, or 4 of the 5 standards, with 1 standard making progress. We're still waiting in on acceleration. Acceleration comes later in the school year, and I'll provide that update to the board in terms of where we fall there. But once again, we anticipate absolutely outstanding results. When you're looking at the second area, which is equity, culture, and climate, we're celebrating our least restrictive environment state ranking. It was 40 and now is 15. That is a tremendous lift. That's reevaluating IEPs, that's pushing students to be in a least restrictive environment, which says 2 things, if you're to look at the overall outcomes. We also hit the mark in terms of our students with disabilities target for overall growth, that we hit that. Why did we hit that? Number 1 strategy, provide them with the least restrictive environment in order to be successful. In this particular area, we're comparing ourselves in terms of state ranking with other districts. State has not provided that particular data set yet. That's the other districts' overall outcomes. This is the area in which we've had, 1 assessment last year in ELA and math, and new assessment this year. So we're looking at growth over the course of time, which definitely demonstrates significant progress. And we know based on the overall improvement of student scoring at 3, when this data is provided, some of those yellow ticks, 9 of the 13, are showing progress, will ultimately shift to green. So we're excited about that. Looking at communication and engagement, which is the 3rd area, we were able to achieve the target in each and every single one of those specific areas. So a number of opportunities for our community to member to engage in district activities. Those are district-specific activities. The target was just 70. We actually had 91% of students accessing focus The target was 88, that's 89. And the number of parent workshops offered from a district system went from 65 to 139. Now, we were very intentional in this specific area last year because we reopened our schools, and we wanted teachers and families to know our schools are open. We are part of the community. We want you inside of our schools, and we wanted to lead and set that example from a district perspective and making sure our principals understood we're in service of our families, we're in service of our parents, and we want to make sure we provide every opportunity to highlight that work. One of the things you're going to see in this upcoming year, customer service is the absolute paramount. It will be on everybody's evaluation as we move forward. And this school year, whether you are a principal or district administrator, the highest level of customer support. We understand parents have choices. We embrace the fact that parents have choices. And our job is to make sure everyone understands the best choice is a public school here in Indiana River County. Looking at our talent and development, retention of highly effective teachers, the target was 92. We were able to hit 95, so we're very excited about that. Certified African American instructors, the baseline was 9, our target was 14. We did not hit that. A very, very difficult year, as we were referencing during our first conversation. So we were able to maintain 11. So we have not decreased below where we were prior to the implementation of this plan, but we're looking to continue to increase that number this year. Instructional staff out of field, this is a hard target. We set a target of 7% with recruiting teachers. We were able to hit the target, but that really is a reflection of all the work of HR, our principals, C&I, providing the courses needed to get teachers within certification. And then we were able, our target for certified Hispanic instructors target was 13. Although we started at 5, we're only at 8, so we're not where we would want to be, but ultimately continuing to grow. Significant barriers and challenges in terms of making sure we hit those specific numbers, while at the same time ensuring that we're hiring the best of the best. And at the end of the day, who we want standing in front of our teachers is the absolute best instructors who are afforded the opportunities or the privilege to educate our children. When you look at fiscal responsibilities, we were able to achieve or hit our target in all of the areas, 10 of the 11, with 1 making progress. We were able to secure, made a commitment to this board. We want to begin to provide supplemental funding. We were able to increase that number to $4.2 million raised above and beyond what we had generated in terms of money being provided from the state. We're going to significantly look to increase that number this year. We had 100% compliance with the state mandated safety drills, extension cords, door stoppers, Ms. Barrenborg. We're on it. 100% compliance with the Florida Safe Schools Assessment Tool. Mr. Seymour, Mr. Teskey, thank you for hitting that. And then 98% of our initial health and safety physical plant violations corrected, which is also very, very significant, and it just speaks to the leadership within the areas of that specific area. All right, now as we move into the revisions for the upcoming strategic plan, and I've had numerous conversations with all of you, and I'll reference some of the things that I said at the beginning of the year. There are some opportunities to set the bar even higher. And when I say set the bar even higher, we're out of the pandemic. We've made the transition to the new standards. So we can begin to really look at how we're measuring our growth in order to ensure we're looking at our students' growth from year to year. So I'm excited about pulling forward some of those targets. We want to incorporate measures of progress from fall to spring. With the new state assessment, we were taking the assessments on the 3rd day of school. Why were we taking those assessments on the 3rd day of school? Because that is information that helps our teachers understand where to drive instruction to meet the individual needs of students. So now that the state has moved to that model, we can incorporate that and hold ourselves accountable for maximizing growth from the 1st day of school to the last day of school. Narrowing the focus of some of our targets related to achievement gaps for deeper implementation of strategic support. Being very, very intimate as to what we're doing in order to grow all students. Some of the gap work that we're doing right now is good, but if a white population goes down and the African American population stays the same, did we really close the gap, or did we not hit the mark with our white students? So we really want to look at the growth of all students in terms of really just looking at it in the fairest, most equitable way. And then establishing systems of support, shift identity strategy towards building sustainability. A lot of this work that we're doing now, we just need to sustain the work. And it would be disingenuous of me to continue to work on strategies where it is fully functioning. So we just want to move and kind of increase them. I'll give you some examples. Highly qualified staff. The district has that. We just need to ensure that that's a sustainable practice that we continue to do without having to continue to manage it. We move on to something bigger and better. So there will be opportunities throughout our strategic plan to say, we have this, we got it, we're in a good place. What's next for us in terms of moving to our, hitting the goals for our strategic plan? Expand work in the focus areas and communication and engagement to include celebrations, recognitions of staff accomplishments. Really setting the example of building morale. And I know Ms. Barenborg has been here each of the last 2 Fridays, and she's had the opportunity to see us celebrating some of the work that we have done over the course of this school year, and we want to continue to model that and set a culture where people really look forward to coming to work. Looking at some of the methodologies in terms of the Florida State Board of Education requirements, aligning our terminology. We want everything that we do to be 100% reflective of what is expected from us, and ensure that we are in alignment, so we'll be bringing forward some of those recommendations. And then make needed adjustments to our African American Achievement Plan to ensure ongoing alignment with the district work. So African American Achievement Plan is aligned to our district's strategic plan. And we will continue to evaluate the implementation of that plan moving forward, and then make shifts and modifications in order to ensure the African American Achievement Plan is in fact supporting our overall district plan. So we are excited about continuing to do that work. That is some of the strategic plans. I thank all of our board members for their feedback. Each of you push, whether it is weekly, whether it's during evaluation meetings, to ensure that you have the best interest of not only me, this cabinet, but ultimately our children. Thank you for that. I have provided you, because I just finished all of the evaluations from all of you. So I appreciate all of your feedback that you have provided. I provided you those outcomes. The overall score for me was 4.2, which is in alignment, if not a little bit higher than previous years. And as I referenced before, this is what my proposal is. We finish the evaluation and move forward. I'll provide additional data as it becomes available with the slight shifts or tweaks you may see from the state. I feel 100% comfortable that the system is moving in the right direction, and with the continued leadership of this board, we can continue to push to ensure we are setting ourselves as an example here in the state of Florida. Thank you. And any feedback you'd have, I'd be happy to receive it.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Board members? Dr. Posca?
Sure. I'd say, thank you for all that you've done and the work that the entire district is doing. And listening to your presentation on your strategic plan, I thought it was fascinating and interesting to see where we started was obviously during the COVID pandemic, and everything that went on with that, whether it be shutting down schools, the mandatory masking, and the detrimental effects it had on the quality of education. And, we were able to sail through it because we had different leadership in this state and in this county. If you look at the numbers in Minnesota, very different numbers. Majority of kids are deficient in reading and mathematics. So I think as we move forward, I know some of you may know, there's some discussions of potentially going back to lockdowns, mandatory masking across the country. I've spoken to VA employees that were told they will have mandatory vaccines and masks coming up, as well as federal employees saying they will be going back to lockdowns. So I would just encourage you guys, be flexible, be strong. We have to focus on our kids' education, and I think in this county we will be somewhat insulated.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Posca. Ms. Barenborg? Okay, Ms. Rosario?
Yes.
Thank you.
So thank you for all of the work that you all have been doing throughout the year. It has made a tremendous difference, obviously, moving forward, moving the needle forward. Just as you mentioned, Dr. Moore, there's still work to be done, but I'd like to also attribute the collective work, right? Not just the individual work, but the collective work that we are doing as a district that aligns with a lot of the changes that happened in legislation, a lot of the changes that happened from the Department of Education, a lot of the changes that actually came down that changed our standards in some of, specifically in ELA and in math, that changed the focus of what education should look like and what we as educators should focus on. We, as in those who are in the day-to-day operations of it. But in addition to that, there were also new curriculum that were, did I say that right? There was new curriculum that was implemented that really aligned with the standards. I think you all understand what I meant by that. And then new assessments, right? So we have the new monitoring assessments that I think have really changed the way testing was meant to be, was in the past and is now meant to be, to target the monitoring of students on a regular basis so that we can view and see how students are learning in their on grade level work. Again, aligning with standards and aligning with the curriculum. And I think all of those put together really show a holistic view of how the system can work in favor of children academically. And this was a perfect year. So moving forward, if we have all of these good components that work together and we're putting the pieces of these puzzles where they need to be, I'm excited to see. I know that there's going to be even, the best is yet to come, right? So we know that there is still more growth to be had in the district academically with children. This next year, we're focusing on social studies standards, civics, literacy, and the like. So I know that we're going to come full circle at some point. And I know that turning a district around usually takes 4 to 5 years. It was something that, Dr. Moore, when you were hired, I know that you and I have had those kinds of conversations. So we certainly need to allow that time to happen before we can see the full growth. Little steps along the way are fantastic to celebrate, but collectively, there's so much more that is a part of what happens in the classroom. And honestly, even when I was in the classroom, I never saw that. I never saw the bigger picture of the influences that legislation can have in the classroom or that local policy making can have in the classroom, honestly, until I was a school board member. And that's being completely transparent. So all of these experiences really, I'm able to kind of have a bird's eye view into what's really happening in the classrooms. And I'm glad that we don't have any other kind of, social, political, controversial stuff in the classrooms, that in the classrooms they can focus on content. And that's where I think we are seeing the growth, which is wonderful. So I'm happy with that. I'm glad that we're moving forward. I do have a question that I did ask of you, but I think publicly it's worth asking again. The African American Achievement Plan within the strategic plan, those targets, those outcomes have not been provided for us, that data. When will we see the data, the outcomes for that part of the strategic plan?
Thank you. And through the chair, the African American Achievement Plan is in support of our district's strategic plan.
Right.
As we receive all of that data from the state, because some of it compares ourselves to other counties, which is a practice that overarchingly says we're performing better. I'm pushing us as a system to look individually. So over the next 2 months, as we begin crafting our next strategic plan, we'll be able to bring back to the board, this is where we're falling within each of the different components of our African American Achievement Plan. So at the end of the day, that work is ongoing. It doesn't stop. We're assessing in real time instruction. We're assessing the reaction to what we're seeing in classrooms in order to ensure that we're moving all children forward. So it is a bit frustrating to me that we have to go through this. I mean, we all knew this 3 years ago when we created this plan, that we were going through this shift, and we didn't know the lag time in which we'd have the data to make really, really solid decisions. But I want to give you the assurances, the board the assurances, the community the assurances. We're looking at the behaviors, we're looking at the instruction, and making sure where it matters the most in the classroom, we are in fact providing quality instruction aligned to the needs of kids.
And then, so thank you for that answer. It's one of the reasons why I put tentative, it's because I want to have a full picture of, all of the data together on the evaluation. But one of the slides that you have up there are proposed revisions. And something that I did not notice was, which I'm hoping that it might have just been inadvertent, to not include state rankings moving forward. Are we moving away from state rankings and sticking strictly with percentages moving forward? Because state rankings doesn't give us a clear picture as to what is happening in our classrooms.
So I think so the answer to your question is yes and yes. I still will look at state rankings in terms of the standard one, but that won't be the only variable in which to evaluate success. Because what you're saying is, are our students growing from X% proficient to an increased value of students being proficient? So in terms of looking at our rate of growth, make mistakes about it. We will move faster than other districts are moving, and I'll provide you that data. But at the same time, we want to be evaluated from the rate of growth over the course of one particular school year. And we also want to be evaluated in terms of growth from where students ended last school year to where they ended this particular school year. So in Section 2, I will not use state rankings, but in Section 1, I'll provide that with a significant amount of additional data as well.
But it still doesn't give us a good indication as to how we did from year to year.
I'm going to provide that information.
You're just looking at comparing us in comparison to the entire state. But if the entire state is doing very poorly and we're doing better than the state, it doesn't necessarily show that we have a significant.
That is a true statement. We are outperforming the state, and I think
by
our teachers deserve.
By a few percentage points, but that doesn't necessarily, then that doesn't, then you have to ask the question, how is the state doing? So if the state is functioning at 30, let's do the low, let's say 30%. Let's say the state is 30% proficient, right? The entire state, and we're doing 35%. It doesn't show what we're actually doing in the classrooms in our schools. It only compares us with the entire state. And in that picture, as an example, which is a very poor example, it would show that neither we or the state are doing well. Because, 30 or 35% of our students are functioning at proficiency level, and that's not good. So if we look at 1 year, third grade, 1 year, which is what we used to do before the pandemic. 1 year, third grade, their scores were 30%, 50%, and then the next year our third graders, who are now fourth graders, became 40%, and that's how you can see that growth, specifically as it relates to our district in our classrooms. State rankings doesn't give us that.
So, yes, we will be looking at growth from year to year. I want to give a comprehensive picture. I agree, overarching in terms of what we are doing as a county. If our students are learning faster and moving to proficiency quicker, that is a good sign for the system. What you're saying is, can we be a little bit more detailed from year to year? And I think the answer to that question is yes. We can look at growth from day 1 to day 180. We can look at X% of students who are proficient on PM3 in comparison to the students at the end of this year on PM3. Those are all criteria now that we are beyond the shift of standards, beyond the pandemic, that gives this board and this community a better picture as to how we're doing in comparison to other districts, how we're doing over the course of a school year, and how we did at the end of the year in comparison to the previous school year. So I'm going to cut the apple every single which way for the board to see, no matter how you look at it, either we are or we are not growing.
Well, then, if you're going to do that, then do 2 pages then. Do state
Oh, no, yeah,
rankings and then do the percentage. Because this doesn't do anything for me. This does not, looking at state rankings is great to say, oh, yeah, we did, we're doing better than the state. I mean, that's wonderful, and that is something to applaud. But it does not show me how we are functioning, how we are increasing from within. It doesn't give me any indication as to whether we're doing 50% or 60% or 30% at proficient in all of these areas. So we really need to, and it's always been like that. For as long as I can remember, all districts have always looked at data based on percentages that were specific to their district, not in comparison to the entire state. This state ranking only happened because of the pandemic, because we didn't have a baseline anymore, because students didn't take the assessments that year, which I get, and that's okay. But then moving out of the pandemic, we didn't need to keep doing that. We needed to move forward, just to return to business as usual, and we still haven't gotten there.
Right. And I think if you go back to this is adding up the percent of students that are proficient. And it's looking at our growth from last year to the previous year. So when you look at the entire state of Florida, is it a state ranking? Yeah, we're ranking the total points that was provided from the state, but the driver in that is the rate of growth from the previous year to last year, or the year that just finished. So I don't know that we're cutting hairs. I think because we are in fact beyond it, and you're not looking at a document because it hasn't been created, because my goal here is to get feedback,
Right.
and yours is crystal clear in terms of the
Right.
feedback. I will provide all of the data that says we were at 22%, that's an awful example, we were at 75%, and the goal is to be at 82% next year, which,
Yeah.
and break it down.
I'm just talking this.
I got it.
I mean, I see what you have there. I can ask for individual data like I did with the monitoring assessment. That's the stuff that I look at that I appreciate because I can actually see the growth.
Right.
Or if there isn't any growth, I can actually see the growth. This doesn't show me anything in terms of strategic plan, and this is what I'm talking about here, not comparing
Okay.
with state rankings.
Okay, any other board member? Ms. Berenborg?
Sure, thank you. Couple things. Where to start? Okay, so yeah, we went through a pandemic. We have new assessments. So I understand comparing us to state rankings because I remember board members saying, we expect you, when we hired you, to help us get in the top 10% of state rankings. So I understand that and appreciate the fact that you put state rankings on there. I do understand also the need for percentages and looking at students compared to themselves and their cohorts. So I appreciate both of those. We have a contract with you, and one of our jobs as school board members is to evaluate you. And so looking at your contract, which is available to anyone to see, it is in board docs, you can look at it. On page 19 in your contract, under section 7, it says goals, evaluations, board member discussions, and board action. On A, it says that you will give us a report during the first available meeting in August of your goals. So you met that. I appreciate that. Thank you. B says the first day in August, super reports to board members report of goals and performance, which you did the first week of August when we met with you. So maybe that needs to be reworded in your contract to first week of August or whatever. However, with the state not giving us assessment results until sometimes in the fall now, we may want to look at this and this time period of evaluation, of maybe moving it back to September. I'm not sure. That's a discussion we all need to have with you. And that might be better for you. I'm not sure. Also, you've got start of schools in August and all that, so it's kind of crazy. Then it says, during the 2-week period after the first day of August, board members will give you our evaluation and place it on the meeting agenda. It needs to be placed on the meeting agenda for action no later than August 30th. That means that it needs to be an action item on our meeting to approve our evaluations, which I don't think we have it on there.
We've never done it.
I know, it's in his
Just a moment,
contract.
just
I
wait to
know.
be recognized. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Berenberg.
Thank you. It's in the contract. So my point is we either need to look at that contract and say, do we want to tweak this, or do we want to live by it and do it? So I think that in this day of legalese, we have attorneys for all kinds of things, and we have a contract with you, we ought to uphold our side of the contract. And one of those things is to get the evaluation out on time. And I know 4 of us did that. One of us was extremely late with our evaluation. Be it because we needed more information or whatever it is, you know what? Teachers don't get that. When the state is late with their assessments and their information, they still have to have an evaluation done on time. Everything needs to be done on time. So we need to hold ourselves to that, to the contract. And the contract says that we will do that on time. So I apologize for that not being done on time. A couple of things in here. You had a slide that says accessing focus for parents and how that went up. I want to give a shout out and kudos to Mr. E. in Fellsmere, because I know what they did this year. They brought out tons of computers. They got help from the district office. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To help parents get emails who'd never been on email before, to help parents access computers that have never used them before. So kudos to them for all of that hard work to make sure that their parents could access Focus. Because I know more and more of what's out there is now online, and it's expected that people look online for information. You mentioned customer service. You know what I have said to you about phones being answered in this district, especially after school hours for transportation. That needs to be critical. And I do that, you know I do that. I call different lines, different things, and see how many people I can't get. And then I tell you, okay, we need to work on this. So when you're talking about customer service, one thing is to answer a phone. Number 1, set it on camera again. Here we go. And then proposed revisions. I didn't see anything about ESC in there. And you know from what I have to do, because I'm working on my recertification for my license, I looked at ESC and took the instructional leadership course on ESC and compared it to our strategic plan. And we definitely have some holes in there and gaps in there that we need to fill as far as ESC students and ESC services and how we're addressing the needs of our kids with special disabilities. So I would like to see that in your proposed revision. And you have my presentation on that.
Thank you, thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Berenberg?
I'm done.
Just a few things, Dr. Moore. This is an off-the-cuff question now. You're not prepared, but after you look at everything, and you look at your evaluation, and you look at the strategic plan, what's your number 1 goal?
To build ownership.
Okay. And what do
When
you
I
mean
say
by
that, each and every single person in the school system feeling passionate about where they work and the kind of work that they do. And I think once we have that, everything moves to creating sustainable growth versus me having to push or sell it. I think the group of people who make up the school district of Indian River County are absolutely wonderful people. And at the end of the day, this growth that we celebrate has more to do with them and their willingness to do things in the best interest of children. That's why this district is moving.
Thank you. I think we talked about, too, we should be getting our information regarding our scores by race, you think about in October. And then we can look carefully, African American Achievement Plan, part of the strategic plan, where we need to hone in on that and what are the strategies we will be using. And I know that comes in October. Just want to say that even since the beginning of school, what I've seen the last couple of years, which I really love, is that district staff people not in their offices. I love that they're out at schools. I love that they're there for support. I love that they have an open dialogue with the principal. It's not a gotcha. It's not a gotcha. You know, listen, I do something wrong, let me know. I'll correct it, move on, apologize if necessary. And I think that's very, very important because, you know, otherwise you might have some principals saying, I'm afraid to do this or I'm afraid to do that. So I love the support. And I also love the fact, and this is when you came, I wasn't here then, but that your evaluation is tied to the strategic plan. I mean, we never take very much time to pat ourselves on the back, but we need to do that. But we also know we can never become complacent. And every person will tell you that. Even when every child gets a 5, what else can we do? Are we challenging our gifted? Are we doing this? So, no, really. And what we have now are the state rankings. The percentages will show us some things. Obviously, we want to do better. But the fact that your evaluation is tied to the strategic plan, it just makes sense. So thank you on that. Any other comments, board members? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Barefoot.
Doc?
Sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add a couple of comments. First of all, I think there's one thing in this report that stood out to me in the academic achievement piece was the middle school rankings, which were outstanding in every respect. And I appreciate the discussion around relative versus absolute results that Mrs. Rosario and Dr. Moore were having. I think absolutes, the relative ranking, as Mrs. Rosario pointed out, don't mean a lot if everybody's doing poorly. We could be the best of a poor lot, but absolute rankings matter a lot. The middle school rankings are really good. And what that tells me over the next few years as these middle schoolers progress up through the high school, that we should continue to see the benefits of a very strong foundation that's been laid here over the last couple of years, in spite of the environment in which the teachers and the district has had to operate. So I just want to point out that those responsible, whether it started when they were in elementary school and it's continued in the middle school, I think deserve a lot of credit for having our kids perform as well on an absolute basis as the results show they have. And we can look forward to having the benefit of that over the next several years.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot.
Madam Chair, that concludes my agenda. The next item is on you.
Thank you. Board member items, African American history standards. Okay, the first thing, I told Dr. Moore I may be adding this to discussion tonight. I just don't ever want to surprise him, but I wanted to bring it up at workshop for several reasons. First thing I want to do is read a policy, a school board policy, 22.1. School board members as individuals do not separately possess the powers that reside in the board. Board members shall have authority only when acting as a board legally in session. The board shall not be bound in any way by any statement or action on the part of any individual board member, except when such statement or action is pursuant to specific official instructions of the board. Dr. Moore was sent a copy of the letter to the Governor, Commissioner, State Board of Education that I wrote. He then called and said a board member asked for a copy, which is fine, and I said, please send it to all board members, certainly not trying to hide this from anyone. I signed my name to it only, and I stated in the first paragraph, not the opinion of the board, it was my opinion. A few times I have said the most important policy we have is non-discrimination, whether it is race, religion, culture, sexual orientation, or disability, any type of discrimination. Under standards for boardmanship in our policy book, it says, make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of all children, regardless of ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. Well, it is my opinion that I see discrimination in the new standard in African American history for middle grades, which is now to be fully implemented starting with the 24-25 school year. I think the majority of our community knows we are now reviewing social study textbooks, and that's a very important time. And we all know African American history is certainly part of our American history. We must all look closely at these standards. That we have a separate standard or strand for African American, that's good that we're being specific on that. But as I wrote to the Commissioner of Education, the Governor of the State Board, I stated that I had some other concerns, but I would concentrate now on one standard and clarification. One of the standards states the following for middle school students. Examine the various duties and trades performed by slaves. agricultural work, painting, carpeting, tailoring, domestic services, blacksmithing, and transportation. What they were told to do or suffer severe consequences, in my opinion, is not a duty or a trade. If they didn't do this, they were severely punished. More importantly, the clarification bothered me even more. Instruction includes how slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. When I first looked at this standard and clarification, I actually had to read them several times. We are talking about one of the most horrific events imaginable that continued for over 300 years in this country. Slavery of people because of the color of their skin. There were no benefits to slavery. In letter from Commissioner Diaz to the superintendents on July 26, it stated, "We are not turning our backs on the great work of this African American work group." And just to remind everyone, a work group is appointed who worked on these standards. There were 13 in that work group. "We are to implement these standards swiftly, transparently, and honestly." That was July 26. Then on August 5th, we received an email from our social studies coordinator, Mrs. Teskey, because she had checked on this. The implementation timeline has not been finalized. The standards are fully approved, or teachers may begin teaching lessons aligned to them in the 23-24 school year. We anticipate courses containing the new standards going before the State Board of Education in October. Full implementation will probably be in the 24-25 school year. So first of all, Dr. Moore, I have a question for you. Are these African American standards being taught this year?
Through the chair, as you just referenced, the state is planning. The state is still creating materials and resources over the course of this year with the expectation of full implementation for 24-25.
Thank you. As I said, I have a concern about a few of the standards, but now we have a year to review. My letter to the commissioner, governor, and state board was pretty specific. You all have a copy of it, in my opinion, but I do want to share a couple sentences. Can you imagine an African-American student listening to a teacher say that there were benefits to slavery? Or an African-American teacher having to teach this? Or for that matter, a teacher or child of any race teaching or hearing this? I said I will not support this, and my hope today here is, board collectively, we say we're not going to accept a standard or clarification nor teach it in the curriculum when the time comes or if the time comes. There's a new law stating we really can't make a race feel bad about what their ancestors did. And for 50 years, I have never seen that taught, where we're making any race feel bad for what their ancestors did. We taught it so we taught history so everyone know the horrific time in our history, and hopefully we learn by our mistakes. So going back, not making anyone feel bad, and yet we don't think we will make black children feel bad because we are saying their ancestors who were slaves benefited. This is just not right. My hope is the board today, or we'll discuss it, this is not an action item. I'm not looking to say this, this, and this, and we're going to have to wait for see what happens in October, that this board and every school board sends a message to the governor and the commissioner. We will now not allow the teaching of this standard or the clarification. And Dr. Moore, here's what I don't want to do. I know if you look at CPOMs, and as a former teacher and educator in this district, every class has specific standards, and there are a lot of them, and not every teacher will get to them. I don't want to play a game, say, oh, we won't get to that, so we won't hurt anybody. No, this is wrong, and everyone knows it. We need to stand up to what is wrong. Just my final thought, a couple thoughts. From our standards of boardmanship, it states, students are protected from conditions harmful to learning and or to the student's mental and or physical health and or safety is protected as well. I believe that the standard would be implemented. It would be the wrong thing to do. I will remind, as I said in my letter, as a parent, you don't have to make your child sit through that. As a teacher, I would support you not teaching it. And then Mr. Allen, who wrote some things, and he's from Fernandina Beach, where my husband went to high school. No matter how you look at it, or no matter that you say modifying the passage, despite the oppressive system of slavery. Slavery lasted 300 years, for about 15 generations. Who was able to do that except those who were allegedly free in 1867? No generation of slaves in 300 years used that to their benefit. And then in 1867, as we know, the Jim Crow laws began. So who was even allowed to do that? Even looking at it specifically or putting words like that, it's just wrong. So I just wanted to present this to the board. I'll bring it up most likely in discussion. And I'm sorry, one more thing if you don't mind. Had some colleagues of mine really look through every standard there is for the African American standards. Violence is just mentioned 5 times. Twice it is mentioned in terms of violence against and by African Americans, specifically regarding the Tulsa massacre. So they protected themselves, and they were the ones who were violent. Hopefully you all know about Ocoee and Rosewood. A lot of that was for voting rights. So I think this is wrong. We are here as a close majority minority district. And if we are saying this to our students or allowing this to be taught, my colleagues, we are not on the right side of history on this one. So I just wanted to put that out for you. I'll most likely bring it up for discussion tonight. Any comments? Ms. Berenborg?
I also wrote a letter that will be handed to all of you on the dais tonight. I will just read part of that letter because it refers to what you just said. Talking about the standard that you pointed out, which was SS 68AA 2.3, which talks about duties and trades. I wrote, the standard needs to be removed or revised and have the clarification removed. I understand that the members of the task force are standing behind the intent of this standard. However, the wording is obvious insult to community members and should be taken into consideration when revising the standards. The interpretation of this standard has led to African Americans having their dignity insulted and therefore has no place in our classroom instruction. But I also went further, and there is another standard that I wanted to refer to, and that is the one that you kind of referenced about Tulsa massacre. I specifically talked about the Ocoee massacre since it happened kind of closely here. I wrote about this standard that out of that, it's the clarification that is the big problem, the big flag. The standard needs a revision of clarification too. The Ocoee massacre, which took place in Florida, was horrific, and the statement above states that acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans insinuates that African Americans caused the massacre of their own race because they tried to exercise their right to vote, which led to the riot. There are lessons to be learned about this riot, among the other examples. However, the verbiage could and needs to be changed to, again, not insult community members that are obviously sensitive to the way the standard is written. As a school board member, I listen to community input, and that input helps influence my decisions. I urge you to do the same and listen to the community instead of defending. Acknowledge that the standards can be updated and revised, just like all other standards are. When a small task force is working on standards, they stand behind them as the work they did has meaning, and they are usually proud of their outcome. This is a small group that is close to the decision-making and didn't have the input from so many people that will be impacted by the influence of these standards. They and you have now heard this input, and I urge you to listen to the outcry and make these needed changes soon.
Thank you. Ms. Rosario?
I have a question, Dr. Moore, for teachers in their classroom. If someone doesn't agree with a standard to, I don't know, if someone doesn't agree with algebraic expressions, can they pick and choose which standards they are not going to teach? If it's an ELA standard and a teacher does not agree with a particular ELA standard, whatever that might be, pick anyone. Does the teacher get to pick and choose which one they can teach and which one they can ignore?
Through the chair, I have to be honest, in my 29 years, I don't think there's ever been a scenario in which you're presenting right now where that's ever actually happened. In today's world, the standards do drive instruction. We have policies that support. The alignment to standards is extremely important for teachers, for administrators, as well as our community. It's the assurances that we give that this is in fact what's teaching. But I cannot recall someone saying, I don't agree with this, and I'm refusing to teach it.
So we have laws that actually bind, I could use that word bind, that actually bind educators and require them to teach to the standards of their state. I mean, this is throughout the entire country. So if the state creates standards and a teacher is hired to teach those standards, then a teacher is required to teach to those standards. Maybe that's a legal issue, but have you ever heard of someone supporting a teacher if they choose not to teach that, or encouraging a teacher to not teach a particular standard?
Through the chair, not in my 29 years.
Would that be legal? Maybe that's a question for the attorney. Would there be a legal standing for someone to just choose which standard they will or will not teach?
Through the chair, I can only speak generally insofar as I am stepping in this week. As a general principle, I'll just say it in the context of the Constitution, statute, and rules. The Constitution establishes school boards as separate entities. By statute, they are subordinate to the DOE and the Board of Education rules. And as such, those rules would guide a district, and policies would be guided by those rules and in turn by the statutes. And I guess if you're asking for a specific question in the individual classroom, then the individual classroom would be guided as well by those standards.
So we do have a law. It is statute 1006.28 that identifies the duties of district school boards, school superintendents, school principals regarding K through 12 instructional materials. And on there, the school board or the school district, it actually reads, the district school board has the constitutional duty and responsibility to select and provide adequate instructional materials for all students in accordance with the requirements of this part. The district school board also has the following specific duties and responsibilities, and it includes courses of study or the adoption of courses of study, which happens in our curriculum adoption process. Content of all instructional materials. Each district school board shall adopt a policy regarding the objection of a parent for specific material. And I'm just kind of paraphrasing as I go through. An instructional material shall not meet the criteria of 1006.31 and some of the other things there. Any material used in the classroom made available to the in the school classroom library or included on a reading list, so on and so forth. And then it keeps going. It continues on with our requirements to teach with the instructional materials that are required by the State Board of Education. So provide and proper requisitioning, distribution, accounting, storage, care, and use of all instructional materials, and furnish such other instructional materials as may be needed. Instructional materials used may be consistent with the district goals and objections and the course descriptions described in the rule of the State Board of Education, as well as the applicable state academic standards provided in 1003.41. So we are bound to teach, as indicated in the law, the standards that are provided by the Board of Education. It doesn't say anywhere that we have the ability to pick and choose which one of those standards we want to teach or not. So my concern here is whether one would agree or not with the standard of the African American standards that we're talking about now, with the one standard that was brought up or the other one regarding Ocoee, the Ocoee massacre. Whether one would agree with that or not, we do not have the right to pick and choose what teachers can and cannot teach. And I would never ask you, Dr. Moore, to put you in a position to allow teachers to pick and choose which standards they can and cannot. Would you want to have that conversation with the Chancellor of the Department of Education and ask if a teacher can pick and choose? If this standard is put forth, could the teacher deny or could the teacher choose not to teach it? Is that a conversation that you're willing to have?
Through the chair, I think the conversation the board is having now is what to do, board proper, in anticipation of what will happen next school year. So it's not a question to be asked now.
That's not my question, though. My question to you is, would you feel comfortable asking the chancellor if a teacher in our district feels uncomfortable teaching that one particular standard, would it be proper for that teacher to refuse to teach it? Would you, as superintendent, be able to have that conversation and ask the chancellor?
Yeah.
So, can you call him up and ask him? Can a teacher, yeah,
No.
I'm just saying, can you have that conversation and ask? Because according to the law says no.
And that's the dilemma I think the board is trying to address.
There's nothing to address, the law says no.
I
You can't change the law.
I understand what the law says. But the predicament comes into play in the 24-25 school year.
But
So-
right now, the law is the law. So right
Yeah.
now, the law says we cannot pick and choose which standards.
Dr. Jones, can I say
Okay,
something?
yes, we'll go Dr. Jones, you and then myself, Dr. Pasco.
I have nothing to add for
Okay.
for this meeting. If you're going to bring it up again in the board meeting,
Okay, buddy.
I'll add my input.
Thank you.
Yeah, by writing a letter to the chancellor asking to revise a benchmark, that is not saying to teachers not to teach it, what's in law. So I want that clarification right now. The letter that I'm writing is to the chancellor asking to revise the standards. I have in the past seen teachers that were uncomfortable teaching sexual education classes or evolution because they didn't believe in it in their religion. And I have seen where those teachers went to their principal and said, could you get somebody else to teach this standard? I need to walk out of the room and not teach it. And that has happened. That is a possibility, is it not?
It's happened before.
Through the chair, in that scenario, yeah.
The kids are still getting that instruction of that standard. Okay, so that is something that possibly can happen. Also, we have a parental rights bill, and that parents can remove their students from any instruction that they choose is against their thoughts of what their child can't be subjected to, or they can remove their students from that class that day. So that is also on parents to be able to do, correct, for this?
That is correct,
Okay.
in all other curriculum as well.
Couple things. First of all, the state board has not had full approval, and I believe that happens in October.
Yes.
That was the information I received. And I know we're talking about next year, but my point of bringing this up today was, as a board, can we just say, we don't want to teach a standard, this is not something we want to do, so that we have time, not only board members, but parents, community members, we have time to change that. That is something that I think is important. I've been looking at standards for 40 years, basically 612, but I do, because when the teacher would send me what their curriculum was, their timeline and their pacing, I would look at those. I have never seen a standard like this. So Dr. Moore, if a teacher refuses to teach us, it's like Ms. Berenborg said, I will support that teacher. And obviously, if this goes through, and if a parent says, not my child to be in there, we're going to support that parent. But I'm just saying, whether this is something that will come down the pike, as a board, we can do the right thing here. We can say, we don't want this in here. Maybe it could be tweaked, I don't know. I just think it should go, and a couple others, but we need to, just like the State Board of Education, just like people do to us, give them our opinion on why we think this is wrong. And that's the reason for bringing that up today. If this does become law, again, parent has the right to take it out, their child out, and the teacher has a right not to teach us. Whether that teacher be African American, Hispanic, white, whoever. It's just not one area. But I just thought as a community, it would be a great coming together. If we truly don't want to make anyone feel bad about anything, and that's going to be hard to do because that, history has got some things we don't want to repeat, then let's do the right thing. Any other discussion? All righty. I think we're on next on the FSBA advocacy position. This is an action item tonight on our board's agenda. And I was on this position last year. It was busy. I was an advocacy person, and then I volunteered for the state legislative platform, which was very good, and then the federal one. And there was at least one meeting a month for those. Federal, not always once a month, but usually quarterly, but they were very informative. And if you're interested, we can talk about that, or obviously nominate yourself or nominate someone. But this is statewide representation, one rep from each school district, interaction with policymakers and stakeholders to promote public education, opportunity to be considered to serve the legislative or federal committees, and they were both good. Monthly meetings, advocacy and communication leadership, and then reporting back to the respective boards. And it ties in what Mr. Bass talked about earlier, bringing all these priorities together, having a certain number, verse 30 of them, you know what I mean? So that just discussion, any questions on that? We'll vote on that tonight because, yes, ma'am.
I just want to make 2 comments about that. First of all, there was an email that was out today from the FSBA that the platform, anything that we want to give input on is due by September 11th.
11th, right, yeah.
Yeah, so we need to get going on that.
Right.
The other thing is, serving as legislative liaison, when I went to those meetings, they would say, really, the legislative liaison person needs to be the advocacy person.
Okay.
It needs to be the same person.
agree.
I'm very willing to do both, because I think they're aligned and it's pretty much the same thing, so.
Any other discussion on that? And we'll vote on that tonight. It's pretty informative, especially the federal one, how the state's sinking in and the federal. It's pretty informative. All righty. Any other? Okay, then we have, I'm sorry, one more. Florida recognition funds, Ms. Berenborg.
I think 2 more, right? You
Okay.
didn't put the other one
And-
on there. Okay, yes, the first one that's on here for me is procedures for Florida recognition funds. And that is basically a school money and how we vote for it. For years now, that's kind of been the standard and it hasn't changed at all. And we really need to look at this because we have some schools that typically get a school money every year, and it causes distress among the faculty and the staff. I'm going to tell you. I have been in the room where people that were friends screamed at each other over a school money, and it's sad. It should be a time of celebration, but the problem with it is there's no direction on how to do this. It's basically how each SAC team wants to do it, and separately. And each SAC team has a different way of doing it. Sometimes they pick out of a hat, sometimes one person goes from person to person. There's no procedure from it. We like procedures attached to policies here, so I suggest that we come up with some sort of procedures as a district and giving direction to our SAC teams on how to do this, because I think that I know they want this direction from the district. And I asked whether or not this is something that, is stepping on state rule or anything, and I was told no. So that's something that I know I asked you and you asked the attorney. So this is something I'm bringing forward to say, could we please have the superintendent develop some sort of recognition fund procedure so that SAC teams all do it the same way. Now, they don't have to vote exactly the same way, but they have to at least do their procedures the same way, so the expectation is out there for all. Because right now, the only thing in place is that they need to operate under sunshine. They need to put their agenda out there ahead of time, and people need to know that they are voting on A school money. That has not always happened in the past here, be real honest. And I think that it causes all kinds of heartache, and we need to get away from it.
So, through the chair, just, I think this is timely because eventually all schools will be A's. So we all will be receiving that money. And it's not only A schools that receive the money. If a school moves up a letter grade, they also receive those compensations. It is up to the SAC committee to approve a plan prior to February 1st. And if it's not approved by February 1st, the funds are distributed amongst the current instructional staff. So creating a timeline and notification requirements that are aligned to what is in statute, absolutely. I think that is the absolute right way to go. So we're making sure, you know, if a teacher from one school is no longer in that school, they know when that meeting is being held. So although they're not in that school, it is voted on by the faculty at the particular school and then ultimately approved by the SAC. So creating something that is 100% aligned to the statute, which is relatively vague. How the funds are dispersed is where a high level of flexibility is provided to the schools or the SAC committees. So, but we can definitely create something.
One thing I want to add to that is, and this might be something to talk to a legislator on, because it may seem like a trivial little thing, A school money, and they vote on this extra money we're going to give them. It's caused such pain with people that I don't think that was the intent by the legislature's legislation to give people a bonus for doing a good job, improving a school or whatever. I think if they knew some of the things that I have been told and witnessed to, I think they would be a little shocked or surprised by. And I think that we can kind of alleviate this pain by having some sort of structure in place where everybody knows what the expectation is. The only thing that bothers me is that if you're on a staff and you worked hard to improve that school, and then you retire or you move on, or you go somewhere else, or you move because of some other reason, you don't have a say in how that money is being distributed, or you don't have a vote now, which I don't think is fair in the process, but that's the process at the state level that we can't change.
Correct.
However, maybe we need to whisper in their ears to change that, because I don't think it's fair for people that work so hard at one school campus to not benefit from their hard work.
On it.
Ms. Barenborg, so basically looking at the alignment and then make sure that SAC gives it to, I mean, the faculty still votes, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we're not changing
Right.
what it says in statute. What we want to do is put some procedures in place so they know how to follow through, because you get different SAC chairs every
Correct.
year at some schools,
Yep.
and they don't know how to do it. They just see, okay, we got to vote on this. And then we're finding out that the votes are very sketchy in some places, and I don't think we want that. I think it's a headache for Mr. Bass. I think it's a headache for Dr. Moore, because I have been witness to some of this, and I just think that we need to clean it up.
Any other questions or discussion on that? I think alignment would help. Dr. Moore?
I think were you referencing an update on the request you made at the last board meeting regarding the TAN? Was that the other one you were referring to?
No.
We're
You said there was one on there, but not the other, so I was
the
just.
ESE strategic plan.
Okay, that was the other,
Yeah.
okay, and you discussed that, okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. All right, I'm good.
Okay, so we're going to ESE strategic plan now? Ms.
Do you
Barenborg?
have that to put up? I sent it to you.
Okay,
Okay,
because I saw it in one of our first
thank you.
handouts.
So when you go through, thank you, when you go through updating your certification for teaching, you have to go through lots of training, and when you're in the classroom on a day-to-day basis, you get it like crazy. But when you're a school board member and you're no longer in the classroom, you don't get it like crazy. So I have asked the district, what could I do? And the answer was, like every other school leader, take the ESE course that's online. It's 20 hours. It was more like 40. and do this homework that I did and also do a presentation. So this is my presentation, but I made it specific to our strategic plan because I felt like I don't want to put people through a presentation they don't need to hear. This one specifically outlines what in our strategic plan I feel like we need to tweak.
I'm sorry, I have clarification. Is that on our agenda? Is this on our agenda?
It didn't get put
Not
on there,
on
but
our
I
agenda.
brought it to him. I
No.
sent it to him.
Through the chair, this is aligned to the item feedback on strategic plan, which I thought when you were going to give that presentation, I thought it aligned perfectly.
I know, it
so
was.
is. All right, so that's-
So it was on our agenda.
It
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
I
Sorry.
saw it.
He
It's the-
didn't, he
it's the
didn't, we didn't
feedback.
do it then.
Right.
So we're going back to whatever item that is,
It's on the first.
under strategic plan. So,
But that's the superintendent strategic plan, and you're not doing the superintendent strategic plan,
This-
correct? Just clarifying, correct?
okay, can I do my presentation?
Well, I'm asking for clarification. I'm allowed to ask for clarification if it's not on the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, now this was on, under the strategic plan area, is that right, Dr. Moore?
And the intent of that item was to provide an update and then seek feedback.
Okay.
So yes.
All righty.
And I sent it to you with an email saying that I would like to do this presentation according to the strategic
Yes.
plan and how we can add ESE
100.
Okay.
to it. All right, thank you. So why school leadership matters for students with disabilities. I'm not going to read every single thing on here. I want you to know what I did is I picked out the things that on the training specifically looked at our strategic plan. There are 13 disabilities under the federal law, and under those disabilities, sometimes we hit those in our plan and sometimes we don't. And there were some that I thought we really needed to look at, and that is because we're not looking at students with disabilities under our data. You know, for data-com meetings, I know you have data-com, is that what you call it? Do you invite all the schools to that and talk about ESE students?
Yes.
So all schools are there, and all schools present.
Through the chair, all principals are there, as well as all district and senior staff. And we go wherever the data tells us to go.
So they're all presenting on their ESE students as well.
If the data is a concern regarding their performance, yes. So we would look subgroup to subgroup.
But if I don't have a school grade, then are we looking at my data as a school?
If you're a child attending a school, we're talking about the data and the impacts of that particular student, yes.
Okay, so that needs to be in the strategic plan about how that works, I guess. The next thing is looking at defining inclusion in our schools. One of the interesting strategic plans that they put forward is Tacoma schools. Tacoma schools are definitely different than our schools. However, one thing that I liked in their strategic plan was the way it was so user-friendly. You go into their strategic plan, and you could click, it's on the website, and you can click on the different topics and get specific information about how inclusion is happening in the different campuses. So it's not just in the district, it's in the schools themselves. And under law, we have to have 75% of our students with disabilities spending 80% of their time in the gen ed classroom. Do we have that number available to us?
Through the chair, I can provide you what that current number is, but it has increased significantly over the last 3 years.
Okay, that would be nice for us to know and put into our plan that we're doing that. The next part of that is that we need to include teachers and parents' input on inclusive practices. So those surveys that we send out to parents, really we should be including that in there. The principals are the LEAs on the campus, and they should lead the schools in inclusive practices, which means that in their surveys also to parents, they should be putting in inclusive statements and inclusive questioning, okay? The next one is about how the leaders on the campuses need to look at students with disabilities for training for their staff. And it is my understanding that our staff, other than Citrus, and there's one other school that has had some sort of training from fiddlers in the last year and a half. That's it. Finn, I'm not sure, because when I called Finn, they didn't even know who was representing our area. So my question is, what training are we getting from ESE for our staff and our teachers?
So through the chair, we have a ESE department, which are the content experts and the law experts in terms of ensuring that we're providing those level of services. So although we haven't relied on outside sources to develop our teachers, we build the capacity internal. Because outsourcing something would always be a secondary request by me. If we have the ongoing daily support of the experts who know our kids and know our teachers and can provide that intimate support for our staff.
But yet, that's an area that I hear the biggest concern about when I walk campuses, is we don't get enough support for our ESE students. We're not looking at our ESE goals enough. We're not giving those kids the hours that they need. I'm not talking about one campus. I'm talking about a couple of different campuses where I'm seeing that teachers, I'm not talking about parents right now, I'm talking about teachers that feel like their kids need the supports, but they're not getting them. And I know we've gone through a lot of change in ESE. I'm hoping and I'm hearing that it's getting better. But I think you've got fiddlers out there, you've got Finn out there, and those are free resources. Now, they cost you for hours for staff training, but it's important training. You know, inclusive practices, it's not just for ESC kids, you know, it's great for ESOL kids, it's great for everybody. So I'm not hearing about much training that's going on out there for inclusive practices. And we have a small ESE department. So are we getting enough training and enough support out there? That's my question. We need to include statements also for collaborative practices on each campus. And a collaborative practice in this training doesn't mean everybody sits in a room and one person talks and everybody listens. It means that you're actually, the principal's listening to the teachers and the teachers feel like they can say it without reprimand. And they need to say specifically, hey, my kids aren't getting this and I need this. And they need to have that ability to have that collaborative, meaningful conversation back and forth. So those are practices I'd like to see in our strategic plan. What are we doing to be collaborative on our campuses and have teachers have a say? And then for district leadership, how are we supporting the LEAs? And what training are they getting to be inclusive on their campuses and to make sure that all kids are getting what they need? How are we reaching out to these different places like Fiddler's Finn and wherever else for professional development for everybody? And how can we include this in our statements, in our strategic plan, so that we're making sure that data is results driven, not just for kids taking regular classes and regular assessments, but how are we making sure that our results are driven for our kids with ESE? And when I pulled this, the vision and the core values, of course I couldn't find the mission on our website, by the way, but I pulled this right off our website, and I remember you made a statement about the core values and said those aren't our core values. I said that's what's on our website right now under district core values. So those were specifically put on our website, and if you notice on here, you know, I can't read it that far because it's so small, but it says diversity adds value to the organization. So how are we showing that in our strategic plan, that we're taking consideration of all students and their needs and making sure that that's put in there? And then, of course, under here, what is inclusive leadership? And I'll send this to you as well, Mr. Seymour. This is the law. And so here's the Florida statute that says we have to be doing these things. We have to use the term inclusion in these things. And I was searching for it. So I think that we need to make sure that we're showing collaborative practices, we're showing inclusive practices, we're being more inclusive to kids that don't count for our school grade, because every student counts. We have in our, right there, all students maximize their full potential. Now, your full potential is different than my full potential, and we all know that. Every student's different. But are we helping all students, not just the ones that count for our school grades? And so with that, I think we need to do three things. We need to look at our plan for inclusive practices. We need to look at inclusive statements and put them into our plan. And we need to include ESE data in our data-driven decisions. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay? And those are my actions. So that's basically my little report I had to do, but it also aligns with what I looked at with the strategic plan. And you know, I said we definitely need to improve our ESE practices and what we're doing. And it starts with the strategic plan.
Board members, any comments? I know Mr. Seymour now leading ESE with Dr. Matthews and talking with principals and so forth. Obviously, they want to do the right thing too in all of the areas and support our students. And I know that if you call and ask a question, you're going to get an answer. So thank you, Ms. Barrenborn. That was really reminding me of a few things I forgot. So I appreciate that. Anything else from anyone? Dr. Moore, anything? Okay. So our next meeting is at 5:30 for awards and presentations. I'd like to adjourn this workshop at 2:04.